Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Media Day has come and gone, which means the new NBA season has officially kicked off. We've got preseason games coming up just a few days away. I'm Trevor Lane. Joining me is Ron Gutterman, filling in for Keith Smith. Keith is now sort of recovered from COVID, but there's this minor thing called a hurricane that is now bearing down on Orlando. So he's dealing with that whole situation right now. But I know he does want to get back on the show. Ron, thank you so much for again bailing us out and jumping on here.
Yeah, we want Keith back. I'm happy to fill in, but yeah, I mean, best of luck to him and his family. That hurricane seems to be a very serious situation. So, best he focused on that instead of this right now.
Keith sent me a photo last night, and I'm sure things have shifted a bit since then. But he sent me a photo last night of the current path of the hurricane, and then there was a line that was drawn across the state of Florida, and it included a dot where Keith's house is, and that dot crosses right over Keith's house. Like that's the path of this hurricane. Now he's hoping in Orlando that it will no longer be a hurricane, that it will be downgraded by the time it actually gets to him. He said that's what normally happens there, but still, scary things going on right now. So hopefully everybody gets out okay, and then hopefully things work out, of course, well for Keith and his family, and he can rejoin us on the show soon. But in the meantime, Ron, you and I have a lot to talk about here. Teams have begun their training camps, a lot of things that are happening. We're getting a lot of workout footage. We're getting all kinds of stuff coming in from every single team. I guess let's start with the Phoenix Suns, who finished up last season with a disastrous game seven, where they essentially no-showed in game seven against the Dallas Mavericks to bow out, and despite being one of, if not the best teams during the regular season. And there was a lot of attention paid to DeAndre Ayton and his relationship with Coach Monty Williams. Ayton and Williams apparently have not spoken all summer. And this, while there's a question that was asked of DeAndre Ayton at Media Day about how he felt when he signed his son's contract, and he seemed, let's say, less than enthused about what was going on there in terms of the Suns matching the contract offer that the Indiana Pacers gave him. So what do we make of this situation, Ron? Like, is this awkward like we're seeing with Russell Westbrook in LA? Is that what's happening now with Phoenix?
Yeah, I'm honestly not sure what's more awkward, Russ or Ayton. I mean, Ayton and the Suns organization clearly had a long-standing disagreement going back to last year when Ayton wanted a max extension, a rookie extension, and the team said no, we're just going to let you hit restricted free agency and we'll do whatever we want there. And instead of working out a sign and trade, instead of doing anything, they just said, yeah, we're going to let you, however long you're going to be free agent, we're going to let that happen. And then we're just going to match whatever, which is such a disappointing thing for a player like DeAndre Ayton, who probably wanted a change of scenery, especially after the way things ended with that ugly Game 7 loss. Clearly, him and the Phoenix Suns are not on the same page, and so now he's kind of trapped there. I mean, for 1 year, he's quite literally trapped because they cannot trade him for 1 year. So he's just kind of stuck there in this place that didn't really want him enough to like work with him in any significant way, and where he probably doesn't want to be. So yeah, I imagine this is going to be a really difficult season for him, and I don't know what type of effect it has on the Suns.
Well, he's got a no trade clause. So in theory, if he wanted to waive that, if they came up with a trade to a team that he wanted, then they could do that. But there is a time limit in terms of when they can trade him by. This was Aiden. Aiden said after the first practice, I haven't spoken to him at all ever since the game. I can show him better than I can tell him. It's life. Nobody cares about the uncomfortable nature of it. It's how you perform and what you bring to the table. What's said is already said. Monty Williams also tried to downplay things, saying that he talks to everybody during camp like he always does, and he doesn't think it's going to be an issue. But still, it's strange when there was clearly problems between Ayton and Monty Williams, then they go that far, that long on the entire summer without speaking, according to Ayton. That's going to put a spotlight on the Suns, an even bigger one. And we'll just have to wait and see how this all plays out, if this affects his play on the court. Sometimes this kind of stuff happens, and then next thing you know, you move past it. Once you get on the floor, everything's good, and you move on. Hopefully, that's what happens here. But again, Ayton, I don't think was thrilled with the Suns, like you said, Ron, and how they handled his free agency this summer. And I don't think he's long for this team. Like, I don't think Ayton will finish this contract on the Phoenix Suns. I think for the Suns, this was about not losing him for nothing. And when they're able to, they're going to part ways with him. It might not be till next year, but I can't imagine that he finishes this contract in Phoenix.
No, and you know what? Of course, there's always the case of like winning cures all. If they
Sure.
start the season, 10-2, or like on a really good hot streak, maybe all is forgiven and they move forward. But given the way the season ended last year, and honestly, for a head coach to not have even one conversation with a player who, yes, is a free agent, but he's a restricted free agent, to not even have one conversation with the guy for months. I mean, that elimination game was in May, and it's almost October now. So like, it's been almost 6 months for them to not talk when he is a pillar of that team. He is the third best player on that team. He is, a blue chip prospect. He's the number one overall pick. Like, it's strange to not have those conversations. Of course, winning cures all, but like, this is one of those cases where if they don't get off to a really great start, this could go from bad to worse.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely could. And again, something we're going to keep an eye on. Speaking of keeping an eye on things, the Raptors are keeping an eye on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with the Oklahoma City Thunder, potentially as a trade target. Now, the Raptors aren't the only team. There is a growing sense around the NBA that, particularly with the unfortunate injury to Chet Holmgren, that the Thunder are still a ways away from being ready to win, being ready to push down on the gas pedal and really go to win games. Whereas Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's gotten so good that he's ready to win right now. And so around the league, teams are watching to see if there's friction here. If OKC decides, you know what, we're not quite on the same timeline here, and they ultimately decide to make a move. What do you think about Toronto being a landing spot, particularly Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? He's Canadian.
I mean, yeah, Shea Gilgis Alexander fits in a lot of places. Like, he is a very, very good player. He would fit in a majority of systems. But if you're thinking about the Raptors specifically, a team that is, really kind of littered with wings, and they're kind of thin at guard. I mean, they have Fred VanVleet, they have some pretty solid guards, but they I wouldn't call them like deep at the guard position. They're deep on wings. And so to go and get one of, a blue chip young guard who's probably one of the better shooting guards in the league, like this would be, if this can materialize in some way. And obviously this is more just monitoring, everyone's monitoring Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Sure.
But if the Raptors were able to make something materialize, I think that would be an incredible thing for them. I think it would vault them up the standings in the East. I don't know that it makes them contenders necessarily, but it makes them a very, very good team, as would anyone acquiring Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
He has 5 years, $180 million on his deal right now. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander does. He's being paid well. He's also only 24 years old. What kind of a deal do you think it takes to get him? Are we looking at like a Donovan Mitchell territory? Is that where we're at with SGA?
No, I don't know that it's Donovan Mitchell territory. I think Donovan Mitchell is, I would say, a slightly better player than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's also proven himself a little bit more. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has not had a lot of opportunities to prove himself on a big stage. He also is on a rookie max extension type deal, so it's a lot of money. I don't know that it's a Donovan Mitchell-esque deal, but I imagine that would be like the framework of what the Thunder would want, but they would probably have to accept a little bit less, because I imagine Donovan Mitchell is just a little bit higher value given his experience in the NBA.
Sure, but that certainly could change this season if SGA comes out firing and he really
Yeah.
proves himself to be hitting that next level, which players his age, this is when guys tend to take that big leap. We'll see. Again, if I'm OKC though, I'm not trading him. I'm not trading him
Yeah.
because I'm hoping that this will be the last year of essentially tanking, right? Of this rebuild. You've got a ton of future draft picks that you could cash in at some point if you need to. Chet Holmgren, heal up, and you can approach next season with SGA, with Chet, with another very high draft pick from this year. You've got other draft assets as well. And
Josh
you could
Giddey.
really, yeah, Josh Giddey, you've got plenty of young players here that you can build around that are going to be getting better. And I think they could be ready to make a real leap. Again, not this season, but next season, I think we could see them on the rise. So if I'm the Thunder, I'm holding off. You've got him under contract for 5 years. Let him do his thing this year. And next year you make the push to really go and try to make a playoff run.
Yeah, I mean, if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was 28, if SGA was like 27, 28, yeah, trade him.
Mhm.
He's only 24 on a 5-year deal. Even if you're considering this year a wash, with which they probably are with Chet Holmgren out for the season, you're still going into next year with Chet, Josh Giddey, and a 25-year-old SGA. It's not like he's old. It's not like he doesn't fit the timeline. He perfectly fits the timeline. He is not yet what we consider to be the NBA prime. He has not hit that yet, and he won't hit it next year either. Generally, it's considered 26 to 30 is that prime, those prime years. So that's 2 years from now for him. So he perfectly fits their timeline to be kind of the face of their rebuild and the leader when they come out and try to contend for the playoffs and for a championship. He projects to be the face of that. So I think it makes very little sense to trade him. The Raptors would be one of those teams, though, that if they were to trade him, I would be really excited to see what he can do in Toronto.
Yeah, he would be an excellent fit there. But like you said, he'd be an excellent fit a lot of places. The Thunder did just make a trade to get Mo Harkless along with some draft capital in exchange for taking in that salary into the Chet Holmgren disabled player exception. So Thunder are still making moves. But one of the things they're going to need to do before the season starts, they're going to actually have to get rid of a few players. They have too many guaranteed contracts. Keep an eye on Derek Favors, 31 years old, $10 million player option that he picked up. Would have to imagine that he's not part of their long-term planning, and I'm sure they're gonna try to do things via trade, but when push comes to shove, and I think this is gonna happen, I would be surprised if Derek Favors didn't negotiate a buyout with the Thunder and then wind up out on the market.
Yeah, and I think a negotiation for a buyout is relatively simple. If he makes 10 million, he's over a 10-year veteran, which means his veteran minimum, I believe, is like 2.7 million.
Mhm.
I think that seems like a pretty fair deal for both sides for the Thunder to essentially save 25% of that contract and get it down to about mid seven figure. And then Derek Favors gets to hit the open market. He will get a minimum contract somewhere. He can still be an impactful player at a minimum. It's at 10 million that no one really wants him because he's not really quite that valuable.
I'm less certain that he will get. And I mean, look at the guys like Hassan Whiteside, Dwight Howard. I mean, LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin. These guys are all still out there right now on the market as a big. I wonder if we're going to see like Kemba Walker hasn't come to an agreement with the Pistons on a buyout just yet. And a lot of that is because he hasn't found the team that's going to pick him up if he becomes a free agent. So he hasn't been willing to give back money. It wouldn't shock me. Now, you may be right. It may be that Derek Favors winds up, he becomes a free agent and then he gets picked up. But it wouldn't shock me if Favors winds up in a similar situation with Kemba Walker, where they don't have an immediate landing spot should he become a free agent and therefore not be willing to give back that money because he's not going to be getting it from another team, at least not right away.
Yeah, I also think, I mean, I don't know how like hot of a take this is, but I feel like Derek Favors is better than pretty much every player you listed.
Sure.
At this point in their careers. Kemba Walker, again, we've talked about him a lot. Like, he's not Kemba Walker anymore, really. Dwight Howard is a fine rotation player, but he's, in his late 30s at this point. LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin, like, have not looked good in a very long time playing basketball. So it's like Derek Favors is one of those guys that I think can still impact a team immediately. And so I wonder if he's maybe in a little bit of a different situation where he would find someone quicker than those other guys. But yeah, I mean, this is a tough market for bigs. So it's going to be a tough market regardless of who you are.
If he does hit the market, the Boston Celtics should be a team that should get on the phone and perhaps give him a call, given what's going on with Robert Williams, which we talked about on a previous show. Speaking of unfortunate injuries, and this is just, I mean, I can only imagine how frustrated he is right now. Lonzo Ball, continuing knee issues. He's going to have surgery again, and then will be reevaluated in 4 to 6 weeks. But listen to this quote from Lonzo. He says, there was a point where we would warm up and stuff, and I would go through certain days and it would be fine. Then whenever I got to real basketball activities, I just couldn't do it. This will be my third surgery. So this time around, I really don't want to rush anything. He said missing the season would be a worst case scenario, but he's talked a bit about being unable to run, being unable to jump, can't do anything without feeling pain right now. I mean, this is a big blow for the Bulls, but for Lonzo, you have to just feel terrible that he's dealing with this discomfort that is affecting him in day-to-day activities now. This isn't just, oh my gosh, he can't get on the basketball floor. He's dealing with pain all the time, and that this is not a good situation.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously we don't know Lonzo Ball personally, but it feels like it's starting to near the territory of like career afflicting injury. Um, it feels like we're starting to near that territory of like what type of toll is this going to take on his career as a whole? Is he going to lose years? Is he going to have to miss entire seasons for this? Like up until this point, he had been a guy where he plays 40 or 50 games, misses 20 or 30 with a knee injury, plays another 40, and now it's starting to feel like this is becoming a recurring issue to the point where this could be not to the level of Derrick Rose esque, but to a pretty significant degree of like this is going to affect his career. And so, it's a difficult situation for him to be in. You feel for Lonzo Ball because he I mean, outside of the basketball stuff, he's a very good basketball player and he's impactful to the Bulls. But also just in life, you want him to be able to like move without having knee pain. So
Mhm.
this is a really difficult situation for him. And I hope this is one of those situations like a Joel Embiid where like this is the surgery that finally does it and like
Yeah.
fixes the issue and he can return in 3-4 months and be an impactful basketball player and be able to live life normally without pain in his knee.
Yeah, and get back to being himself because he is a top-notch defender. Despite all the word about Lonzo coming out of college, out of UCLA, was he's this transcendent offensive player. His passing, his vision is incredible, but his defense is a few steps behind that. As he's become more and more of a solid pro, that's changed. He's still a great passer, but his defense is actually perhaps the best part of his game. The Bulls could definitely need him out there, but this is the front office show contractually. 19.5 million this season, 20.46, essentially 20.5 million next season, fully guaranteed both those years. And then the next season after that, 2024, 2025, is a player option, $21.4 million there. So that's 3 seasons essentially that Lonzo Ball is still on the books for the Chicago Bulls. Hopefully everything works out okay for them, for him there, and they can get him back on the floor because he is, when you're paying a guy that much, you're expecting him to be a big part of your rotation.
Yeah, like, and ideally, I hope that Lonzo Ball is at a place in his career where he can decline that player option. Like, I
Oh
want
yeah.
him, I want him to be there. I think, Lonzo Ball is a very, I think, popular player in the sense of like, no one dislikes him. Everyone is rooting for the best for Lonzo Ball. He is like a well liked guy around the league, and so this is just unfortunate. And the hope is that this can be, this is the final surgery that like gets him back to where he needs to be, and like Derrick Rose, find a way to come back and like impact the game of basketball positively, even if his knee is not 100%. Yeah, I think Derrick Rose figured out a great way to do that, and I think Lonzo Ball can kind of use that as a bit of a springboard there.
All right, with Ime Udoka now, he's suspended for the season. We'll see what happens with his future with the Boston Celtics. Joe Mazzulla now acting as the head coach for the team, the youngest head coach in the NBA, 34 years old, now the head coach. And because this slides him up a spot and Ime Udoka out of it, now you've got to add another assistant to your bench. And they're looking at Jay Larranaga from the Clippers. The Celtics want to speak to him, and latest reporting is that they have been granted permission by the Clippers to speak to Jay Larranaga about rounding out that bench. This is not the way that the Eastern Conference champs from last season want to start things off. This is a lot of disruption. And so I'm curious to see how these Celtics come together to start the year. Are they the powerhouse that we remembered from last season that came up short in the finals? Or does this take its toll? And do we see a little bit of disharmony early on?
Yeah, and this is why I kind of thought they were going to go with a more veteran, like head coach type
Yeah.
to round out the bench. I know there had been rumors about Frank Vogel.
Yeah.
I thought that's the route they were going to go because I figured with so much uncertainty and distraction that you would want like an adult in the room per se. And Jay Larranaga is the Clippers have a great, great staff behind Tyronn Lue. This is no discredit to him, but he's not a head coach. He's never been a head coach. So like, I think the idea of like getting an adult in the room in the head coaching veteran, sense would have been a smarter move. Maybe Frank Vogel declined. I don't really know what happened there. That's where I thought they would go. But I meant, again, the Clippers have a remarkable coaching staff. So pretty much anyone off of there is a smart get.
I mean, we know Frank Vogel pretty well from his time with the Lakers. And we know how good of a defensive coach he can be. Could you imagine Frank Vogel with that Celtics roster?
Yeah, I mean
Like
the
that's a
schemes he would be
perfect fit.
able, yeah, the schemes he would be able to draw up with the versatility in that lineup. I mean, it would be absurd. It would be really ridiculous to watch. But again, can't go wrong with a Clippers assistant because I believe the Clippers have one of the best coaching staffs in the league behind Tyronn Lue. So, yeah, good for them.
Yeah, just something to keep an eye on and see who they ultimately go with. Last thing we've got for today: the Cavs reportedly interested in trading for Jay Crowder. Now, Jay Crowder not participating with the Phoenix Suns right now. Both sides have decided it's time to move on. There have been some rumblings that he wanted an extension. The Suns didn't want to do that, and here we are. Ultimately, Jay Crowder's time in Phoenix appears to be over. What happens from here, and is this the right target here for the Cavs?
I think this is a phenomenal target for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think when they made the Donovan Mitchell trade, you looked at their roster and you said, "Wow, they pretty much have everything pretty much perfect with the exception of a wing." They have, they have a couple of decent wing options. They have Chetty Osman, they have Isaac Okoro. They have solid wing options, but they don't necessarily have great wing depth, and
Mhm.
they're much stronger along the perimeter and in the interior with Mitchell, Garland, Levert, and then Mobley, and in the middle, and Jared Allen. So getting a wing like Jay Crowder, a veteran wing who's been around, he's been to two of the last three NBA finals. Like, this is a dude who just knows how to impact teams positively. Whether you like him or not, I think it's one of those hate to play against, love to have him on your team types.
Mhm.
Yeah, this would be a great fit for them. And now the trouble becomes structuring a trade given Jay Crowder's contracts
Yeah.
and the books that they have in Cleveland. It's a bit tricky.
Yeah, the other teams that have been interested are the Celtics, the Grizzlies, the Mavericks, and the Miami Heat, all interested in pursuing Jay Crowder. So this is not the only landing spot, but you're right. When I look at the Cavs books and I try to figure, I mean, I guess you probably would have to do something around Chetty Osman because I look at this, Kevin Love, 28.9 million, that you're not doing that. Donovan Mitchell, no. Jared Allen, no. Karis LeVert, no. Darius Garland, no. Evan Mobley, no. Isaac Okoro, no. Ricky Rubio, no. You just brought him back into the fold. I mean, it would have to be something around Chetty Osman. That's about the only thing I see that works, unless you want to somehow stack up like Dylan Windler and a few other
And
salaries here. But
I think even Chetty Osman would require a stack of like a Raul Neto or Robin Lopez type. Uh,
exactly.
so I think you need to stack those two. The Cavs don't really have picks that are like near and dear. They have like picks way down the line because they gave up a lot of those picks in the Donovan Mitchell trade. So they're not really in a great position to make this trade. But also the Suns are operating from a standpoint of, we just want to trade this guy. Like, we're not
Yeah.
bringing him back. We just want to trade him. You don't really have leverage when you do that because you have a guy that's not reporting to you, not reporting to your team. So it's better to at least get something. So if they could get Chetty Osman, who is an impactful NBA player and could help the Suns right now, you could get Chetty Osman, you throw in Raul Neto, and then you throw in like a second round pick or
Mhm.
something like that. There's something there, but I don't know if the Cavaliers necessarily have the best thing to offer for Jay Crowder.
Yeah, when I look at those other teams, I think they could get creative and try to figure out some ways to make it work. But I also agree. I don't think the Suns are walking away with a first out of this.
No, no, and then honestly, when you have a player who's not like a bona fide star, if you get rid of your leverage by saying, "Yeah, we're just going to trade him. He's not going to report to training camp," you pretty much are residing to the fact that you're not getting a first for a role player. If this was a star, you would get a first regardless. But for a role player like Jay Crowder, you by taking away your leverage, you're basically admitting, "Hey, we were never getting a first to begin with. Let's just get this done in some fashion."
Is in a kind of the extension for Cam Johnson is going to be related here to this situation because I have to imagine he probably eats up a lot of those minutes that Jay Crowder would be vacating. Now, there's other players the Suns can turn to as well, but arrow up, stock up on Cam Johnson with Jay Crowder apparently being on the way out the door. So he's certainly someone to keep an eye on this season, I think.
Yeah, Cam Johnson's a very good basketball player. The Suns are going to be fine with or without Jay Crowder. And if they could get a guy like Chetty Osman, I actually think like that's a pretty good depth piece
Mhm.
behind Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everybody. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Remember, we are just a few days away from the start of preseason around the NBA. How excited are you for that? Make sure you do subscribe to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel, of course, over on Apple Podcasts. Leave us that 5-star rating and review. Ron, thank you again for coming on here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, and hopefully Keith the Hurricane passes
Yes.
quickly without any damage, and he can get back on here.
Yeah, hopefully everything turns out just fine there in Orlando for, well, everybody, but of course, our buddy Keith Smith as well. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.